Sasuke freaking Uchiha. Man, oh man, Sasuke freaking Uchiha. I mean, there's just so much to say. I mean, that's why I'm making an entire freaking course about the boy Sasuke. I mean, but first, okay, so I just want to kind of start off about what Sasuke means to me and like, why out of the thousands, tens of thousands of anime characters that exist, why am I dedicating my time and prioritizing Sasuke freaking Uchiha? Well, there's obviously the personal aspect, right? Growing up, like I mentioned earlier, anime was my crutch. It was my escape. It was my go-to when I was having a bad day or a good day. I just spent my time in terms of pleasure, in terms of like the biggest dopamine hit, in terms of just what made me comfortable in relating to and being myself. It was anime. And the first anime I ever started watching was Naruto, right? And so because of that, Sasuke kind of he has a place in my heart because he's not just a character that I admire. He's the first character that I've always admired. And still to this day, like I still haven't found a better character out of all the shows that I've watched to mimic the behavior that I want to be like in reality. And display the traits that I want to have in reality. No one does it better than Sasuke. So I'm very grateful that he was the first character that I actually ran into. So who is Sasuke Uchiha? I mean, I'm assuming everyone listening to this, right, knows who Sasuke Uchiha is. But if you don't, for whatever reason, if you're going through this and you have absolutely no idea who Sasuke is, I'll give a short, concise synopsis of Sasuke. Yeah, so basically, I mean, it's like this, right? Sasuke was born into the most powerful clan in the Hidden Leaf Village, right? And so in the show Naruto, there's these different villages, right? That's the way the world is kind of set up into like, kind of different continents, but within these continents, there's like super major villages, right? They're kind of like the United States, Russia, China, these superpowers, right? The biggest superpower of them all, so you could say the United States of the Naruto verse would be the Hidden Leaf Village, right? The Land of Fire, the Hidden Leaf Village. So within the village, right, you have a hierarchy. Of course, just like any country, there's a hierarchy, right? There's a president, there's a leader, there's a king, and then you have like the elites under them, right? So in the Hidden Leaf Village, the highest position that there is in the Hidden Leaf Village is a Hokage. The Hokage is basically the president of the village. He's the one everyone looks up to. He's the ultimate leader. And usually, I love the way Kishimoto set this up too. It's beautiful because the leader isn't just a guy who got it via his bloodline or via scamming his way to the top. No, the way Kishimoto set it up is so beautiful, where it's the leader of the village is 99% of the time the most powerful shinobi in the village. So in order to receive the position of Hokage, you have to truly be the strongest in the village. You have to be able to protect everybody. And I love the way that's set up. Right. So once again, there's a hierarchy, right? So Hokage, and then you have the elites, okay? And so the Hokage, he kind of has advisors. He has like a little small group around him, and usually it's a very small group. When I say small group, I don't mean like a council of like 20, 30 elders, like you'll find in other shows. More like 2 to 3 to max 10 people, right? And so the way the way Kishimoto set it up is, so there's a Hokage, he has his main advisor, right? And then he has a council. These councils are one member picked from all the elite clans, right? And so relating this back to Sasuke is part of the clan known as the Uchiha clan, which is probably the most popular clan in the show Naruto. The Uchiha clan being the most powerful in terms of strength, in terms of power, in terms of influence. The Uchiha clan in the Naruto verse was the most powerful clan basically that ever exists. Not even just in the Hidden Leaf Village, but they were the most powerful clan ever. They held the most influence. They held the most strategic power. They held the most natural, gifted bloodline power. So in terms of like just natural geniuses that they were birthing, the chakra levels of most of their clan members, right? And Sasuke Uchiha was a young boy born into this clan. Yeah, so actually, never mind. This is not going to be short at all. I really want to dive deep into Sasuke, so this is not going to be short and concise. But nonetheless, we're really going to dive deep and like really break down Sasuke, who he is. And it's really cool that we can actually go into his character. This is one thing I love about Kishimoto, is that he really builds a world around all of his characters. Maybe not all of them, but a lot of the characters, at least all the main characters in Naruto, we know all of their storyline. We know their backstory. We know why, the way that they think and why they think the way that they think and why they act the way they act. And, we're able to like really dive deep into like their backstory. So this is awesome. But Yeah, back to Sasuke. So yeah, the Uchiha clan. And before we even continue into Sasuke, or like really go to Sasuke, I actually want to really break down the Uchiha, right? Because they really set the seed as to why Sasuke, of course, dealt with what he dealt with growing up, you know, being alone and being isolated, but also a lot of the mentality of just Uchiha members in general, because, you know, as we know, Sasuke's not the only member, right? You have Obito, you have Madara, you have Itachi, you have Fugaku, you know? And they all have so many things in common, even though they're completely different individuals. You know, like you could say Madara is the complete opposite in terms of goals and passions than Shishui Uchiha, right? But there's these little subtle like foundational principles of personality that all the Uchiha members have, and it's because of what I'm about to say next. So let's get into the Uchiha clan, right? All right, so let's get started. The first thing I want to talk about, at least with the Uchiha, is mentality, because their mentality is the thing that sets the precedent and for the environment that they created, which, you know, allowed so many of their members to go off and thrive so hard. So when we take the roots of the Uchiha, it all goes back to the war with the Senju clan. Their mentality and the environment that they created off into the future was all based off that war with the Senju clan, in my opinion. And so I stated earlier, you know, how, you know, there's villages and the hierarchy, but one thing I forgot to mention about the Hidden Leaf Village in particular is how it was actually formed. So, huge war, Senju clan versus Uchiha clan. Both of them wanted absolute power. They realized they were getting nowhere, and both of their leaders, you know, Hashirama Senju and Madara Uchiha, decided that because the war was getting nowhere, a peace treaty needed to be made, and both clans came to terms. These two clans, by the way, the Senju and the Uchiha, were the two most powerful clans in all of the Naruto verse. No one could mess with them. No one could phase them. But both of them wanted absolute power, and which started and kicked off the war. Anyways, they were able to make a peaceful alliance with each other and create what would be known as the Hidden Leaf Village. But the reason I wanted to go back to this war is because the mentality that it built for the Uchiha. The Uchiha is not just a clan that just happens to be powerful. Yes, they're naturally gifted, they're naturally talented. They were gifted, you know, the Sharingan, which we'll get into later. But they also have this culture that they built that was based off all the pain and suffering, right? You know, I want to get into the Sharingan later, but I should state this now. How is the Sharingan activated? This is so, I love how Kishimoto puts this in there because he's really setting the precedent early in the Naruto show. He sets the precedent as to why the Uchiha are the way they are with little subtle hints like this. Ask yourself, how is the Sharingan activated? You gain the Sharingan through suffering, immense suffering. A wielder of the Sharingan has to go through a context of immense suffering to actually awaken their eye. And in order to upgrade their eye, you know, get MES, or, you know, get the third Toto, right? You have to do something that causes extreme suffering for yourself, in which we saw most of it was killing a sibling and taking their eye, right? So Kishimoto really sets the precedent for why the Uchiha are so tough and have so much temerity of their mindset. And it all goes back to this war. They are a clan that was built off tough times. The Uchiha is a clan built off savageness. The Uchiha dealt with bloodshed, killing, seeing their family members get murked, right? You know, the Great Shinobi War that they were in was these two clans, the Senju and the Uchiha, were having the most powerful war in the Naruto world history. And it was just two clans. There's hundreds of other clans. There's tons of other villages. There's millions of other people. But this war was simply between two clans. I find that extremely interesting. Okay, so the war between the Senju and the Uchiha played obviously a major part in why the Uchiha became the Uchiha, you know, the way that they think, the way that they act, definitely played a role. Another thing that really has to be talked about within the Uchiha, and this isn't, I've never really heard anyone cover this, is the importance of the Sharingan. And Kishimoto, once again, kind of sets the precedent for why the Uchiha think and act the way that they do with the subtle little hints of how the Sharingan is activated, right? The Sharingan is activated through immense suffering and sacrifice. Now, what I'm about to say next is kind of an opinion, but really look into it, right? And no one has ever really covered this, right? No one's ever really talked about this, is the difference between the Sharingan and other Genkais out there. You take a rival Gekkei Genkai. Like, for example, in the Naruto verse, a great one will be the Byakugan of the Hyuga clan. And you compare that to the Sharingan, the way that the eyes are developed are different. You take the Byakugan, right? And I'm also using the Byakugan to mean like other Gekkei Genkais out there. But you take the Byakugan, it's almost like a superpower in the sense that if you were to take a Genin in his natural state and give him the Byakugan, almost immediately his power level would go up, right? He would go up a couple notches in power as far as his ability, even if he's a loser in terms of shinobi. And if he has no skill, by just you giving him the Byakugan, his power level is going to go up tremendously, right? But if you gave that same Genin the Sharingan, his power level is going to stay the same because the Sharingan, and this is what separates it from other Gekkei Genkais out there, in my opinion, is that the Sharingan's power only increases in direct correlation to the shinobi's natural skill using it. What do I mean by this? You do not automatically gain an extra couple notches of power just because you have the Sharingan. No. The Sharingan only increases in power if you are in your natural state increasing in power. So you can take a crappy shinobi and give him the Sharingan and he will remain a crappy shinobi. But if you give a naturally gifted a shinobi who's been working on his skill, right? And then you apply him the Sharingan, that's when the Sharingan will have its power. And this is kind of common sense, but it really isn't. If you compare it to something like the Byakugan or other Gekkei Genkais out there, the other Gekkei Genkais are almost like superpowers where he could be a trash shinobi, right? Someone who hasn't really worked as hard as someone like Itachi, doesn't have as much skill as someone like Itachi. But you give him that other Gekkei Genkai and automatically he's going to have more power because it's like a superpower. That Gekkei Genkai off rip is at 100%. But the Sharingan does not start off at 100%. It starts off at 0. And it's in accordance with how powerful the shinobi is in his natural state is how powerful the Sharingan will be once it's activated. You see what I mean? It's very subtle, but it's there. And I have to state that because the Uchiha are geniuses. They're extremely strong. But a lot of people will say they're strong because of the Sharingan, when I say that's the complete opposite. In my opinion, they are strong because in their natural state, they work super hard. And on top of that, they have the Sharingan. The Sharingan is like the cherry on top, and a very big cherry on top. And kind of to drive this point home, Kishimoto himself shows us this in the show, right? You take someone like Danzo. Danzo was a trash shinobi. He was never naturally strong. He was never naturally gifted. He never naturally had a work ethic. And we see this in his backstory. He was very jealous of the third Hokage when they were growing up. He was very jealous of just powerful people around him, and he never put in the work. And so his ideology was to, I would just go take the dead Uchiha members. I'll take the eyes off of them. Once I murder their clan, once I take Itachi and force him to murder the clan, I would just take eyes off of them and then I'll become powerful. That was his mindset, right? Lame loser mindset. I hate Danzo with a passion. He gets the eyes, and I forget the exact number, but he had a lot of Uchiha eyes, right? He had more Sharingans than Uchiha members themselves, right? He had an armful of Sharingans, but what was his power level? If the Sharingan themselves, in itself, the Sharingan by itself was an increase of power level, then Danzo would have been a freaking god. He would have been Madara, right? But that wasn't the case. Because the Sharingan by itself does nothing. It is only powerful in accordance with the wielder, right? Another example is Shin Uchiha. And I'm not sure if Shin is an actual natural-born Uchiha member or if he was a created character. I forget. I have to do my backstory or my research on that. But you take someone like Shin Uchiha in the sense that he's not a naturally gifted shinobi. He never put in the work, and it's very obvious, right? But he thought by getting a bunch of Sharingans, he would become strong. He got the Sharingans. He didn't become strong. Like, we all saw the fight. Like, he got bodied, right? That's my point. But here's what drives it home. You take the opposite of that mentality. You take someone like Kakashi Hatake, son of the White Fang, someone who grew up intelligent, someone who grew up with extreme work ethic, someone who grew up and just put in the repetition. He then gets a Sharingan off of his best friend. And guess what? His power level went up. The Sharingan only increases in power in direct correlation to the natural state of the wielder, right? So I'm saying all this to say this. The Uchiha are so powerful because in their default state, without their Gekkei Genkai, they all had to become powerful. And then you take the Gekkei Genkai and put that on top of their natural state of work ethic, And that's when they become the most powerful clan in the Naruto-verse. And I felt that was extremely important for me to say and get into you guys' heads and kind of go in depth into that, because the Uchiha clan are not this powerful clan with such a high sense of self-worth because they were born with it. They were born with a Gekken Genkai, but they worked for their status. They worked for their power, and that has to be said. And that's why I have such a deep respect for the Uchiha. And you should too. All right, so I stated all of that. We went into all that, right? And all of that was a build up to the main point, which is this: the environment that the Uchiha built. And I really want to go deep into this, is the environment that they built, because the environment is the thing that allowed all the other Uchiha members and just the majority of their clan to just go off and be successful. The environment and culture that the Uchiha built, which I call the Uchiha culture, is what allowed all of their members to be the insane bosses that they were, and the reason why we all love the Uchiha so much. So, number one, we talked about like the toughness that they built through the war. You know, the war against the Senju, that built the toughness, the savageness, just the temerity of mindset, and just a mindset of that of confidence. Right? They've been through battle, they've been through hard times, and they know that they can overcome it. And then of course we talked about how they had to build their Gekken Genkai, the Sharingan, and how it becomes activated through pain, suffering, and how the Sharingan becomes powerful through them working extremely hard. You know, the Sharingan is something that they're born with, but the Sharingan doesn't make them, they make the Sharingan, right? So now we come to the environment and the culture, the Uchiha culture. The Uchiha have an extremely high sense of self-worth. The Uchiha love themselves. The Uchiha do not care about anybody else but the Uchiha. And you could say, I mean, a lot of people have said this is arrogance. A lot of people have said, you know, they're very hubris individuals. But like I just stated, man, they worked for it. They really did work for it. But that's not the point. The point is, they built this culture and environment that we are the best clan on the planet and that no one can phase us. And that's what we got. If I had to wrap the Uchiha culture into one saying, it would be this: expected excellence. The Uchiha expected excellence. And it trickled down from the top of the clan all the way to the bottom to the children. They expected excellence. It was just normal to them. Birthing geniuses and having geniuses around them, that was normal. That was the environment. That was the culture. It was everyday to them. It was mundane to them. It was just normal. You know, having powerful shinobis was normal. Having geniuses with extreme IQ was normal. Having your children be at the top of their class was normal. You know, when an Uchiha child went off to school, got the straight A's, was top of their class, when they came home, their parents didn't praise them, at least in the same way, you know, relative to a parent who expects their kids to get C's, D's, and F's. An Uchiha parent would probably say, good job, but it was just normal. They didn't praise them because that was the culture. It was expected excellence. And so this sets the foundation for like a personality like Itachi Uchiha, for a personality like Shisui, and of course, for a personality like Sasuke. There were so many great shinobis that came from the Uchiha clan, but one thing has to be mentioned, which I just mentioned, is that it was expected of them from birth to perform at a high level. And if they didn't, they were probably outcasted. You know what I mean? Every child wants to be validated by their parents. Your parents, until you become to the age of reason, your parents, especially your father, is like your God, pretty much. Every child wants to fit in. Every child wants to be validated. Every child wants to be a part of their family. You know what I mean? And so when the expectation is set so high, and not just for Fugaku and his subset, his family, but for the entire clan, every single Uchiha parent in their family, when the expectation is set so high, that child is going to do whatever it takes to meet that expectation so that they can get validated by not only their family, but by their entire clan and that entire clan's culture. This is why the Uchiha are so powerful. Every child that got born into that clan was expected to perform, and that child knew that the only way to get that sense of validation, that sense of family, right, was to become great. And to them, once again, because it was so normal, to them it wasn't even quote unquote greatness. To them it wasn't even quote unquote power. It was just being an Uchiha. And so, through the family of Fugaku, Kishimoto was able to show us examples of this as to how Uchiha children behaved in school are two prime examples that he gave us, being Itachi and Sasuke. We both got to see how they acted, how they behaved, and how they moved about in school, their mentality and just the way that they acted, right, around other children who weren't Uchiha like them. And it becomes fairly obvious, everything that I just stated up to this moment, which is the environment that they lived in and the Uchiha culture played such a huge part as to how they operated around other people. They were not phased around other people. They saw themselves as better than the other people around them. That's just exactly what it was. Like, it's just the culture that they lived in on a day-to-day basis was completely different from all the other children, right? The other children, for the most part, you have your Hyuga clan, right? The Hyuga clan are, in terms of culture, in terms of family culture, was probably the closest to the Uchiha, but nowhere near the same. But these other kids at the academy, they weren't being surrounded on a day-to-day basis by such high expectations. And so when Itachi or Sasuke goes to school and they see how easy it is for everyone else, right? And they just see how different that they are compared to everyone else, they have this high sense of self-worth. And that's when you see Itachi and Sasuke not paying attention to anybody else in school. I'm not saying this is a good, or no, I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but they just saw themselves as better. They didn't let anyone faze them because they knew no one could touch them. Because when they went home, when they left the academy and went home, they went home to high expectations, whereas all the other children just went home. All right, so this is the last thing I want to touch on with the Uchiha, and this is extremely important as well. And everything that we've talked about so far has built up to this right here, is how power hungry they are. The Uchiha are power hungry, or were power hungry savages. And it's because of everything that I stated. The culture that they built through tough times, through hard work, through blood, sweat, and tears, and of course, through plenty of their members dying in combat and dying in other ways, they became the most powerful clan that there was in that world. And because of that, they knew that they could take advantage. And if they took advantage, nothing would happen to them. Because the Senju kind of died out. I don't really know exactly what happened to the Senju. I got to do some research onto that. But the Uchiha were the powerful, and they were the undisputed powerful. No one could rival them. No one could stop them. And that's where you get this power-hungry culture. Now, I also want to state that Uchiha children, we saw it through Itachi, through Sasuke, and I'm sure all the other Uchiha children, they acted better when they were around other people who weren't Uchiha. But remember, children only do the behaviors that they see their parents do. And so Kishimoto showed us the way that adult Uchihas acted, through a numerous amount of ways. But I think the main three ways was the police force, the Uchiha were the police force for the Hidden Leaf Village, the tension with the village elders, and of course, the end, which was the coup d'etat that they tried to make happen regardless of the extreme amount of devastation, lives, and just destruction that would happen, that they knew would happen as a consequence of this coup. And one person that I need to talk about really shortly is Fugaku Uchiha. Because remember, Fugaku wasn't just Sasuke's father. Fugaku wasn't just Itachi's father. Fugaku Uchiha was the leader of the Uchiha, and he, at the end of the day, was the one who was leading them. He was the one who was giving them the green light to take certain actions, and he was the mastermind behind most of what the Uchiha did. And so when we got to see flashbacks of the Uchiha police force and how they were acting with civilians, right? There was so many fights and scruffles and just tensions between the civilians and the Uchiha, right? Fugaku was the one that was allowing all that to happen. The tensions with the Hidden Leaf elders, right? And I'm not saying, I'm not trying to diss the Uchiha or saying that they were acting in a bad way, but I'm definitely not saying that they were acting in a good way. But the tensions with the village elders, and of course the plan to get a hold of the nine-tailed fox and the coup d'etat, Fugaku was the leader of all that. And so I think, and this is a personal opinion, but when I studied, characters and studied the way specific individuals were acting because of their backstory and their environment, I think Sasuke Uchiha, more than anybody else in the show, was a mirror, not a direct mirror, but a mirror of Fugaku Uchiha. When I studied Fugaku and I saw his focus, because Fugaku, let's just kind of break down his personality. He wasn't the nicest guy. Fugaku, and he couldn't be, right? He was the leader of the Uchiha, and there was so much tension between them in the village, especially the other village elites. Fugaku was a very, I wouldn't say stern, but he was a very, he had that temerity in his mentality. Fugaku He had focused energy. That's who he was. You never really saw Fugaku smiling. You never really saw Fugaku shooting the shits with others and being extremely, humble and nice. And like, he just wasn't that guy. He was very focused. He had a plan and he wanted to execute that plan. And that plan was, in the end at least, ultimate power. Coup d'etat, nine-tailed fox, Uchiha on top. That was his plan. And so I can very much see, and we'll talk about Sasuke's focus later on, but Sasuke really derived his focus from his father Fugaku. But my main point is Fugaku was leading the Uchiha, and he had a lot of the traits that Itachi and Sasuke would ultimately carry out. But Fugaku was carrying those traits in the negative way. He was using those traits to do bad, in a sense. All right, and so to wrap this up, I just felt it was pretty important and a priority that I must, go and give the backstory as to the Uchiha, because the way the Uchiha were formed and the way the Uchiha lived and the environment and culture and everything that they created plays a huge, extreme role into the life of Sasuke and Uchiha and why Sasuke became the individual that he was. He was born into the most powerful clan on earth. His father was the leader of that most powerful clan. And that obviously, all those things play a subconscious part into the mentality and the ambition and just the individual of Sasuke Uchiha and why he became who he was.